Okay, today we're going to talk about using the orthographic view and reference images, and then I'm going to demonstrate how to model a table using the extrude, the bevel, the multi-cut tool, and then using the shortcut to preview what an object looks like when it's smooth. So the first thing we want to do is set up the project correctly. So we're going to go to File, we're going to go to Set Project as our first step, and on the desktop, it's fine. And I'm going to name this Table Demo. And, oh, sorry, messed up. So press this, the yellow folder with the flash next to it. So name that Table Demo. Delete this out of here. So all we want to do is we want to select this. If we click into it by mistake, don't do that. So we just press this button right here to go back up. Select Table Demo. That's the name of the new directory. We're going to set it. And this error message will, or not error message, this message will show up. And we'll choose to create a default workspace. And so if we look here, that showed up on my desktop. Got Table Demo. And then if we look inside the Table Demo, we've got a workspace mel. So we need some more folders in there. So that brings us to the second step of 3. So second step, we go to File, and this time instead of Set Project, we go to Project Window. So we go to File, Project Window, and here we'll see that it has showed up Table Demo on the desktop. We have all these folders, those look good. So we'll press Accept, and now under Table Demo here, we'll see that it is populated with all the folders that we need. So the last step here is we're just going to save our myosine into that project folder to make sure that it's going to the right place. So step 3, we're going to go to File, Save Scene As, and then we got Desktop, Table Demo, Scenes. So we're going to save it into the Scenes folder. Always save it into the Scenes folder. So I'll name this Table Version 1 and Save As. And now we'll see under that, and I'll close it out. So under that Table Demo project folder, it used to be basically empty except for that workspace, but then we added in those folders with the second step. And then the third step, under Scenes, we saved our myosine. So now everything's all set up, almost. And so the project is set up, but now we want to import our reference image into the orthographic view. So this is the side table here that we're going to use. So instead of putting it into the images folder, put it into the source images folder. The images folder is there for exports, and so the source images is where we use images that are going to go into the scene here. So the project's all set up now, and the first thing I want to do is, we're in the perspective mode right now, and I want to go to the orthographic view, which you press this button right here where my cursor is with the 4 views. You can also press the space bar and it'll go there. So space bar is the shortcut. So we have this view here. We have the 4 views. Oops, we have the 4 views. And so we have the perspective view here. Then we have the top view to the left. We have the front view and the side view. And so if we create an object here, we can see that we got the perspective view, then this is the top view here, and then the front and the side will look the same under this perspective, right? So we want to import this reference image in so that we can basically trace it. And so what we're going to do is we're going to go into this front view in the bottom left here, and we're going to go to View, Image Plane, Import Image. So again, this view is where we start. View, image plane, import image. So I'm just going to leave that up for a moment so you can see it. And so what this is going to do is we're going to import that reference image into this orthographic view. So import, then it comes right up, source images, right? My likes for the images to be in that folder, so it'll pull right up. And we'll see that the image is in the scene now. And if we look at the top view, for instance, we'll see that it went into this front view and it's nicely aligned in the scene. What you don't want to do is don't import it into the perspective view. So if we import it into the perspective view, and this is what not to do, you'll import the image in, and it'll come in like that, and that's not helpful. Right, we're kind of moving the scene around right now, but that image is just kind of plastered in the back, and so we don't want that. So in the front view, we just go to View, Image Plane, Import Image. And so the reason we're doing that, normally when you import something into a piece of software, you go to like File, right, and then import something, and you can import it that way. But the reason that we're importing it like this is we want it specifically to go into an image plane, or the orthographic view. And if it was the top view that we were trying to trace, we would import it into the top view instead of the front view. So View, Image Plane, Import Image. We'll choose the image, press OK. It shows up in the scene. If you press this button right here, which is the Move tool, or press W, you see how that shortcut shows up there? So you can press W and we can move it around. Do not grab it by the center there for the Move tool. You will want to use the center for the Scale tool, because the Scale tool, when you grab it from the center, it scales uniformly, but the Move tool, it kind of moves it around in a way that's a little hard to predict. Like if you look in the perspective view, it looks like I'm moving it from left to right here, but if you look at the top view, see, like it dragged it diagonally into a space, and it can just be hard to control. So with the Move tool, it's much better to grab it by the arrows here. So one thing to keep in mind is this grid is measured in centimeters right now. So this looks like it's 50 centimeters wide or something like that here. So this table is really small right now. So the first thing we'll want to do is scale it up. So we'll scale it by the center here. And so just click that yellow box right there, that center box, and drag from left to right. Get it to be a little bit larger. Then we'll press W, or go to the Move tool there. We'll just drag it up. We can look at this view. So I moved over to the front view here. So just move it up a little bit so it lines up. And then the last thing we want to do is, if we look at the perspective view, this image is kind of in the way. This is where we want to be modeling. And so we want to move it backwards in space here. So, and it's hard to tell sometimes if you're dragging it forwards or backwards. So what I like to do is, with the outliner here, I can see that the image plane is there. So it's selected, and then I move over to the attribute editor. And under the attribute editor, this first tab kind of shows the, how do you say this, like the color gain, color offset, just the colors of the image. You can adjust some of that here. You can do the alpha gain, which kind of gives it some transparency, which can sometimes be useful. But here I'm just trying to move it backwards in space. So I click over to this first tab right here that says Image Plane 1. And if you look here, we have these controls here where we can rotate it, and we can just type in numerically, how we want to translate it. We don't want to rotate it, and I actually don't like scaling it here, because if you scale it with a value here, it's now 15 wide, but these others stay the same. You'll just have to type it in 3 times, and we want this to stay in proportion, right? So instead of changing the scale, I like to just go over to the Scale tool and then grab it by the center there. But where this area is helpful is that we want to move this backwards in space. And if we move it forwards in space, it'll show up in front of the model, which we don't want, because we want to be able to see the model. So keep your eye on, I think it'll be this z-axis here. So if we move it that way, so right now I'm actually moving it forward in space, because you can see that number is a positive value. If I drag it this way, it goes to a negative value right here. So negative value is good, and we can push it back pretty far. So let's just go like negative 100. And so now that's not going to be in the way of our scene anymore. But then when we go to this view, the orthographic view right here, you'll see that it still appears the same in this front orthographic view, no matter how close or far it is in the scene. You see I'm dragging it around, but it's not actually moving in this window here. So negative 100 is going to be good, I think. And so now we're ready to start modeling. So I'm going to show you how to model two parts of this today. I'm going to show how to model the top base here, and then we're going to show how to model this column right here. So modeling the top first, we're going to do this by creating a cylinder. We can also, for other projects, use this polydisc, but the polydisc is not what we want here. So even though you can make a cylinder using that shape, this is better for building organic objects or things where you plan on needing to extrude with a more even mesh. But the cylinder is better for this situation because we kind of want the edges to kind of come out of that single point there. So I'm going to work on the table first. So the first thing I want to do before doing anything else is think about what my plan is here. So my plan here is that I'm planning on not needing to smooth this later on and add more geometry. I plan on just kind of having this, since it's such a simple object, it's just this round cylindrical top up here. I'm just going to start off with a high number of subdivisions. So before I move it, scale it, do anything to it, I'm going to make sure it's selected here, and then I'm going to go over to the attribute editor to the right, and here I'm going to just make some adjustments. So the main adjustment I want to make is it's got 20 subdivisions on the axis, and if I drag the slider, you see that there's less subdivisions there. By default, it was it's either 20 or 25, I can't remember. And if we look at that, if we were to render this image, you'd see we would have these facets here along the outer edge. So we don't want those facets, we want this to be a rounded edge. And so let's just make this a higher number there. So 68 is good. And we're ready to start modeling here. So modeling this object, what I like to do is, we've been in the orthographic view up to this point, but what I prefer to do when modeling this way for this particular kind of object is directly beneath the orthographic 4 view there's this 2 view, and I prefer that one. So, and you can kind of adjust these sliders a little bit. I'm working on a small computer right now, so it's a little hard for me to see. But it just kind of increases the screen size a little bit. So we got the perspective view here, which is very helpful, and then we've got the orthographic view here, which we'll use to trace things here. And so one thing I like to do is, for this orthographic view, I like to be in the wireframe mode, and then here I like to be in the shaded mode and the perspective view. So for the orthographic view, you can go up to shading and choose wireframe, and you'll see here that the object is now a wireframe and we can see through it, whereas we couldn't see through it before. It normally looks like that. And so when we can see it through it, we're able to kind of trace that image in the background better. But I still like it to be shaded here, so I can, because it can be a little confusing to look at when it's in wireframe there, right? It's just kind of confusing to the eyes. So you can toggle back and forth between wireframe and shaded on either of these views by pressing 4 for wireframe, 5 for shaded. So I like shaded here and then wireframe there, and that's kind of up to you how you want to do that. So I'm going to move the object up here, and there's two ways that we can scale this up to be the tabletop. So we can scale it, and be sure that when you scale it, that you don't scale it, if you look it to the left here, don't scale it with that what's now that side tab there, because it looks like, when we're looking at the orthographic view, it looks like we're scaling this correctly. But if we actually look at the model in the perspective view, it's going to be an oval, right? And so if you do this, you're going to end up with an uneven table. And sometimes you have an uneven table, like an oval style table. So sometimes you'll want that. But this is a round table here. So this isn't the right way to go about that. So I'm going to undo out of that. And what I want to do is I just want to scale from that center point there to scale it up uniformly. So just scale it up here. And in this orthographic view, that center dot will scale it up uniformly here. So drag it to there, zoom out. I think I didn't undo all the way. Sorry. So scale it up. Okay, so that's circular. And then to bring it back down again, I'm just going to do this top control right there and bring it back to scale. And that looks good. Additionally, so that's kind of the normal way to do it, right? Very simple. So we just drag that center and then we drag this vertical one to get it thin again. The other option would be, since I have this height set up the way I want, if I want that height to stay the same, but all the X and the Y, or the Z and the X, I guess, looking down here, if we want to scale out its diameter, but not its height, what we do is we go to scale, then you'll hold down control, and then you just drag this top control left to right. And so when you hold down control and you scale one of these items, it basically locks the vertical and scales out the others. And this works for the other dimensions too. So if we want to make it taller and wider, but not deeper, looking in the perspective mode, I can hold control and scale it up there, so it'll get kind of deeper and wider. You know, so if you just hold control and do one of these scale parameters, it just kind of locks whichever one you're holding. So there I can kind of get, just kind of with one drag, essentially, I can get this table into position here. So now we're going to go to the modeling toolkit, and you see we have a healthy number of subdivisions here. And I'm going to show the bevel tool first. And so be sure when you bevel and extrude to not be in objects mode. So if you right click and you're in objects mode here and you bevel, some bad things are going to happen here. So I'm just going to press it here, and you see that it kind of got this sun shape here. And that looks cool and everything, but it's that geometry is overlapping right now, and it's causing it's going to cause some issues here for you for this particular instance. So make sure that when you bevel and extrude that you're not in objects mode. Make sure that you are either in edge or face mode, depending on what you're trying to do. So for the bevel, I'll show the edge mode first. So the edge mode, we'll select the outer edge here and press this, and then hold down shift and double click the next edge over. Then we press F to focus, and we've selected a whole edge loop here. And so now I'm just going to go down to bevel, which is down here in the modeling toolkit. You can also find it up here under the poly modeling tab. It's the orange box with the white, the gray Y on it. So press bevel, and it'll look like this. And so I'll enlarge in this. So the bevel, it kind of creates an edge on either side of the original edge. And so there's really three controls that we're going to worry about here. So fraction is the size of the bevel. You see, so I make it small, and it turns into a small bevel, the fraction. And if I make the fraction large, it'll turn into a large bevel. You can either drag that or type it in numerically for any of these. And when you drag it, just hold your cursor over the word. It won't work if you hover the cursor over the numbers. You just have to hover it over the word and drag left to right. So segments is the amount of subdivisions within it. So made the fraction a little bigger so we can see here. So the segments, if we add more segments in here, it's just going to add more subdivisions. And the higher the segments, the more high resolution the bevel will appear. So if we just have like 2 segments in there, you'll see that it's still pretty faceted there. Since I don't plan on smoothing this, I'm going to want a larger number like 7. And then finally, the third and final control that is going to concern us is depth, which goes from a range from -1 to 1. And so that's the full range. So 1 is what I would call like a normal bevel right there. And if we go to -1, it inverts it. And so sometimes that'll be useful. Sometimes you'll want that inverted bevel, you know, that's like a cool look, and it comes up a lot. And then, so that's 1 was the initial, -1 is that inverted, and so 0 is going to be a linear line. right there. So if you want your bevel to stay linear, but you want subdivisions, you set your depth to 0. So for this, 1 is good, and we're good to go there. So when I beveled using an edge, it only beveled one side of this. But let's say, if we look at this table that we're referencing here, it's beveled on both edges if you look where my cursor is, right? So instead of beveling it once up here and then once again down here, instead of beveling the edge, what we can do, and I'm going to edit undo to get out of this, instead of beveling the edge, which is what we did that first time, I'm going to bevel the faces. So if we right click and go to face, press this, we're going to select this the exact same way. So we're going to select one face on this outer edge, then hold down shift and double click the next one. And you'll see here, if I press 4, I'll see a wireframe that, go back to 5, that we've selected all the right faces there. And so now when we bevel, it'll bevel on this side on the top and then this side on the bottom. So whenever you bevel using faces, it kind of creates a bevel along the edge where the selected faces begin and the unselected faces end, right? So we'll see a bevel come on this top side and the bottom side now. So press bevel, and now when we do these controls, we can do them both at once. So I'll type this in numerically. So I'm going to make the bevel smaller. I can also drag that. And I'm going to add segments in here. And since I don't plan on smoothing this, I'm going to go with a high number, like I think 7 or 8 is probably okay. And the depth is okay. We can drag it to be inverted if we want, but I like the depth in this case to be the standard, which is 1. And so now, if we go back to object mode, which is right click, go to object mode, we look at this table, the tabletop looks good. And so when modeling a table, the way I think about it a lot of times is it doesn't all have to be one object here, because if you think about it, whoever made this constructed it out of several pieces of wood, right? So when you're modeling something like this, you can think about it that way. It's like, when it was made, how many objects did the creator use to make it? And you can feel free to make different objects that you need here, and then when we're done, we'll group them together here. So let's name this tabletop. Okay, and so now I'm going to show how to make this area right here. So I'm going to start with the cylinder, which is right here. Press cylinder, and oops. And I'm going to go to the attribute editor and go to polycylinder 2 here to make some changes. I'm going to make this much higher, the height. I'm going to change the height so that, I'm going to change the height to be taller. And I'm going to adjust the radius to be just a little bit more. See, I'll just drag that. Okay. And don't need it to be perfect because we're going to make adjustments here. And I'm just going to give the subdivisions, I'm going to give it some subdivisions in the height. So my plan here with this model is I'm going to smooth it. So I'm not going to work quite as high of subdivisions as I did initially because I was planning on not smoothing that tabletop. But here I'm planning on smoothing it. So whatever I do here in terms of the number of geometry here, it's going to double now because I'm going to smooth it. And so instead of 20, I'm going to start with 40, and then when I smooth it, it'll go to 80. And that'll be okay. I might even do 36, just a little lower. So when I double it, it'll be 72. And so I'm going to add some subdivisions in the height. So if you look at the cylinder here, when I add subdivisions in the height, it's going to add some new edges there. I'm not going to add too many because I want to show the multi-cut tool, which will show us how to add our own into there. Okay, so this is ready to start. And so to adjust this, I want to kind of move these edge loops around. And so there's several ways we can do that. I like to hold down right click, and you'll notice that sometimes that window will come up right there now, which is super annoying. And so what you have to do to avoid that window coming up when you right click is you just have to right click. If I go to smooth shade X-ray, there we go. We have to right click right on the geometry. It's super annoying. So anyway, I go to vertex, and I like to move these edge loops using vertex, because if you look at these edge loops here, these kind of row of purple dots, it's really easy when in vertex mode just to quickly select them and move them up and down. If you select faces or edges, it just takes a little more time to do. So what I'm going to do is I'm just by eye, I'm going to just grab some of these edge loops, and I'm just going to drag them into the position where I want them. So, and I'm going to need to add more edge loops in here as we work. So this is just kind of a starting point. Okay. I'll press Q, and sometimes I find it helpful. It's a little easier to get this breakout right-click menu in the perspective view than it is in the orthographic view, so that is another reason to have this perspective view, this double view kind of available here. So we've shown the Bevel tool, and so next up, under the Modeling Toolkit, I want to show the multi-cut tool, which is down here towards the bottom left. It's the X-Acto knife with the 3 dots next to it. You can also find that at the multi-cut tool here, and that's where we can add in new geometry or new edges. So in objects mode right now, and this works best in objects mode, I press the multi-cut tool and this little X-Acto knife comes up, and you'll see here that I can, when I hold it over an edge it turns red, when I hold it over a vertex it turns red, and so wherever I click it'll add a new line. And make sure that you go to the next edge, one edge to the next. Don't skip edges, because that can sometimes cause problems. Sometimes you can get away with it. It just kind of depends on which version of Maya you're working on. I like to be in the habit of going from one edge to the next just to be safe. And then once you're done creating the edge loop, press return, and that little edge is created. Additionally, you can draw it out from vertices and just draw out new geometry manually. We'll need to look out for creating triangles and 5-sided faces when doing that in the future, so avoid doing that for now, because there's some things I need to show you on that. So those are kind of, that's the first function of the tool. That's the way it works out of the box right there. So what we'll want to do is, when we press the multi-cut tool, press Control on your computer, and when you press Control it creates this edge loop option. And so if I hold it over the vertical edges right here, it'll create a horizontal line, and then if I hold it over the horizontal, it'll create a vertical line. So it's just the opposite of what you select. It'll be perpendicular. And so looking at this model here, I'll want to add in some more geometry. So I'll press Control, and all you need to do is just click, just the normal left click, and it'll add it in for you. And new geometry is added here. So I'm going to add an edge loop there and there. I'm just kind of looking at the model here. So the next step up is this area. If we look at the photo, it comes up further than the original mesh there. So you can right click. Oh my gosh. All right, let's click, go to vertices, and you can scale it up, but if you scale it up, we're not adding geometry to it, so if we look at the model, we've got like a hard edge coming out there, and so it'll just kind of cause a tapering to happen there, and a lot of the times you'll want that tapering. Like for instance down here, the section, we might want to scale that up. But sometimes you want to add some more geometry to this instead of just a simple scale. And remember, when you scale it up, always scale it from the center here. We're trying to keep things uniform. We don't want any of this happening, because it'll cause things not to be round anymore. So you have the option to scale it up. What I'm going to do instead here is I'm going to go hold down right click, go to faces, and we're going to do an extrusion. So I'm going to select these faces here, and I like to make this selection in the orthographic view, and make sure I'm in the modeling toolkit, and press extrude. Now remember, when you extrude, do not extrude out of object mode. You want to extrude out of 99% of the time, or 90% of the time, you want to extrude out of faces. For that first project, to create the cyc, we extruded using edges, which is good in that instance when you're working with a flat surface, like a paper-like surface like the cyc was. But this is a three-dimensional object, and so whenever it's three-dimensional, we're going to always extrude out of faces here. So I want to extrude out, so if we extrude this right now, it is, do you see how there's these artifacts happening right here? We get some overlapping geometry, and it's a bad situation, right? So we don't want that. So hit undo, make sure that we're in faces, and these faces are selected right here, and extrude. And this time, instead of using these arrows right here, they can be okay, but if you drag them wrong, so that one's okay. But if we drag them wrong, do you see how we got these edges overlapping here? And so we want to avoid that altogether here. That's a really bad situation right there. So I'm not going to worry about these for this. I want to make sure everything's uniform, and whenever you want to extrude things or bevel things in a uniform fashion, using this menu right here is the best. And so what I'm going to do here is I'm only going to worry about thickness, and I'm just going to pump that up by numerically. I'll do 0.2, and then if we go back to the 2 view, you can see I could probably go with a little more there. And so now you see we've created that like piston shape here. So once I'm done extruding, I'm going to press Q, and so instead of this area right here being tapered, we have more of a piston shape, which is kind of what we're going for this. Also note that when I extruded, I selected my faces through the orthographic view. I'm just going to quickly demonstrate why I do that. So selecting in the perspective view can be problematic sometimes. So let's just say that I want to select these faces right here. I selected in the orthographic view just by dragging through the center of it, making a square, and then letting go. If I do that same thing, so I'll deselect in the perspective view, select through that perspective view, it'll look like we made the selection correctly, but if we rotate to the back, the selection was actually kind of messed up here, and so that'll lead to some problems when we extrude. So that is why whenever I'm selecting faces, vertices, or edges using this, I'm trying to do it through the orthographic view if I can. Make the extrusion, and then it'll come out evenly every time if we do it that way.
Alright, so we made this extrusion here, and we pulled it out uniformly. Let's just say that we've extruded this already. The extrude button's gone. And after the fact, we want to scale this back down. So that's no problem if we go into faces mode. If we go into faces mode and select these faces here, press F to focus, then I do the scale tool. We can scale it in like this, although you'll see here that it brings it in vertically as well. So to combat that, we'll just press Control. So hold down Control and then do the top arrow, and then it'll bring it in uniformly there. So it keeps the same height, but then we can scale it in and out. So, and let's just do one more extrusion here to kind of keep showing that. So we'll do this, and if we look here, it's hard to see because this is a little pixelated, but there's a little bit of a bevel coming in there. And so if we just scale the faces, it'll kind of bring in everything, and it'll taper everything in, so we don't want that. So we'll need to extrude to kind of add some more geometry here. So I'll extrude, and the thickness will come up. So I'll just drag the thickness in a little bit. Let's do -0.1. Press Q to get out of there. And so we have that new geometry in there now. So the next thing I want to show is the shortcut that previews smoothing. So if we press 1, we have this view right here. And if we press 3, we get a preview of what this will look like when we smooth it. So if we press 3, that's what it looks like right there. And so notice one thing here. So when you press 1, it's not smooth, and then 3 is a preview of smooth. So if we press 1 again, if we go down here and we smooth it out, so under the modeling toolkit, the smooth button right here, which we can also find here. When you smooth something, you can't really go back to the lower geometry. You're kind of stuck with it at that point unless you do edit undo. And so that's why we want to do this preview, so we kind of get a sense of what this model is gonna end up looking like once we smooth it. So if we smooth, you'll see that it looks exactly like what it looked like before, pretty much, with the 3 shortcut. But we have all this extra geometry now that we don't want. And so that's why we're using that. We want to use the 3 button to preview it, what it'll look like down the road here. So press 3, and you'll see that things are just a little more rounded than what we want. And so the way to kind of fight that and get some more hard edges is we need to just add some more geometry in. And so there's several ways to do that. So at this top, if we press 3, it's pretty rounded off up there at the top. So what we just want to do is we can kind of fight that in one of 2 ways here. We can add more bevels. So if I go into edge mode and select this edge, hold down Shift, double click to create the edge loop, and then I bevel here, and I just make some adjustments to this. Okay, so I added 3 segments and a relatively small bevel right there. And if I press 3 to smooth it, you see we have that hard edge right there. So that is one easy way to kind of add in a hard edge where it was kind of more rounded before. I'll press 1 to kind of bring it back out again. And so the other way, let's look at this section down here. So press 3 again. See, it's very rounded here. And if we press 1 again, if we want to add a hard edge here, we can also use the multi-cut tool again. So we press the multi-cut tool, hold down Control, and we just want to add edge loops below and then also above the edge where we want to have a hard edge. Press Q to get out of that. Now press 3, and you see when we preview that, we got a hard edge right there. You know, and the only place where I added it was for this edge right here, right? And so since I only did that edge with that extra geometry, this edge will be hard, but this one doesn't have any added geometry, so it'll still be a soft edge. So press 3. So that's a way to get a hard edge and a soft edge kind of together there on the bevel if you want that. And so you'll just kind of go piece by piece and use these tools between extrude, bevel, and multi-cut to kind of create a replication of this this cylinder here, this antique cylinder. So and then so while we're working, always kind of add geometry, extrude, do all your work with 1 selected, and then press 3 to kind of preview your work, and then go back to 1 before you start working again, because take a look at this edge right here where my cursor is that's running across there. So we're in 1, and if we press 3, you see that edge jumped up to there, and that's not really where the edge is. And so what the that preview smooth tool is doing is it's just kind of it's moving that edge to help show how it averages out when it becomes smoothed. And so when you're trying to add edge loops and things like that, with the 3 button pressed, you'll kind of add something in. And do you see, like, take a close look at where these edges are that are going horizontally there. So there's one there, there's one there, and I'm going to add an edge loop here, and they jumped, right? And so it's it just becomes hard to work, I think, that way. And so I suggest, for that reason, to just work in 1 and then preview in 3. So going back to this view, we'll just kind of keep working to create the bevels and things like that that we need here. So looking at this, so this needs some work up here, so I'm going to start at the top and just move down. So right here, I added that geometry in there to create that hard edge that I kind of wanted there. And it's hard to tell because this image is so pixelated, so I'm kind of guessing here. But what I want to do is I want to add a bevel along this edge. So I'm going to do that and make some adjustments. Press Q to get out of it, and I want to add some dual bevel on this. So in order to do a dual bevel, I'm going to select faces and make sure that it's selected correctly. Press bevel, and now it'll bevel twice at once. Alright, so let's see what this looks like when it's smooth. So that's kind of what we ended up with there. So moving down, so this is interesting. So I kind of created an extrusion, and what I want to do now is preview this. Interesting. Okay, so what I want to do here is you kind of look, and once I preview the smooth, it is kind of curving out from the bottom, okay, and so I just need this to be a little more drastic and then with a harder top edge. So what I will do is I'll go to faces, and I'm going to scale this out by holding Control and dragging it out that way, and then here I'm going to use the multi-cut tool to quickly add some geometry here and here to give that a hard edge. And then here, I'm going to create a bevel to kind of continue to make a hard edge, or another hard edge at that top. And I'm going to make this a small one. And now for this edge loop, bring it down a little bit. Right, so that's one way to kind of get that shape. And so to get that shape, if you look closely, what I did at 1 is that I use the multi-cut to just add in some geometry there to reinforce the kind of hard edges that existed. Then I created my own bevel here to kind of soften that out to create a natural lip. And then I want more of a gradual curve in here. And so to create a gradual curve in, I just didn't add much more geometry, knowing that Maya is going to average some of this out here. And so if I press 3 again, this is kind of what that'll look like once it's smooth. So back to 1. The object needs to be selected when I press 1. So we'll just kind of keep working here. So I'm going to work on creating this shape. So looking at this, I just need to think about it for 1 sec. Need to add a little more geometry. And okay, so what I'm going to do, let's go to faces, select all these faces, and I'm going to extrude out. Again, not going to grab those arrows, and I'm just going to increase the thickness a little bit. That's okay. And press Q. And I'm just going to keep starting from the top and then working down. That's going to be my approach here. So, come on. So it's like a kind of like a double bevel happening there. So let's work on creating that. Where to do that? I'm going to do a multi-cut. It's interesting. Okay, so I'm going to create this edge loop, and I'm going to scale it in using the center scale, just to bring that in a little bit. And with it still selected, I'm going to bevel, make a small bevel. So I'm pressing 3 to preview. Okay, that's all right. Q to get out. Back to edge, double select. Oh, I know what I'll do. Let's see. Okay. So this is the kind of thing where attention to detail is really rewarded here. So you just got to be patient and kind of work through some things. I need this edge to be a little harder, right? So basically, whenever I want it, when I smooth, for it to look more like it does unsmoothed, is when I do this multi-cut tool to just kind of add in more geometry to reinforce the unsmoothed version kind of in this, and I want to do it in this area. So press Control, bring it in as close as I can, and see. Sometimes it'll only want to add in vertically, which is always fun. I swear I can like sense when I'm tired here. Okay. So what I'll do here is, if it's not gonna let me do this, so what I'll do instead is I'm gonna go to Edge. So if ever you want to add a multi-cut and it's not letting you, so what I suggest doing is to bevel at this point, and then take the fraction and make it really small. Oops. And you see there, I did it 0.05, and so, and I only did one segment there. And so that way, that segment is really tiny and is almost the same thing as if I had gone in and done the multi-cut. So let's press 3 again. So here we're starting to kind of get that double bevel a little bit. And so you kind of get the idea here, right? It's I'm just going to continue to kind of work to demonstrate how to keep progressing here. Going to extrude here. Oops. Okay, I need to undo that. Make sure that I'm back in 1. So what I did is I forgot that I was in 3 instead of 1. So what I need to do is just, I'm just going to undo. Okay. So that is a good example of why I'd always make sure to work in 1 instead of 3. So I pressed 1, make sure that I'm in 1 and it's not smooth. Go to Faces, and I'm just going to extrude out this little section right here. And do that here. Okay. And so here, I'm going to keep those faces selected, and I'm just going to, I want a double-sided bevel. So I'm just, before clicking anything else, I'll extrude and then bevel. And add in some parameters here. And so you can start to see how you can start to kind of move rapidly here. So sometimes when it's not letting you add something in horizontally and you want to, and it's just insisting on doing vertically, sometimes that means that you're just trying to grab it too close to an edge. Let's see if I can demonstrate that. You see how I can get it to work if I just kind of start down here, and that's okay. So I can just get that edge loop in there, select it, right, by selecting one, double selecting the other while holding shift, and then I'll just press W and just manually drag it up close, and now we have the same thing. And same thing, similar with this, if I want to bring it in closer, so I select that edge loop, and then if I scale it in, it'll kind of come in uniformly as long as I scale it in from the center and I don't scale it in with one of these outer tools. So press Q to get out, objects mode, and then if I press 3, you can see there that that bevel is pretty much exactly the way I want it on the bottom, and I just need to do that exact same thing for the top so that it matches the top section up there. So same thing, just going to do the multi-cut tool there and there. I'm going to select this edge loop and just bring it down a little closer so that it'll be tighter in there. Select this edge loop, and then I'm going to scale it in to make it tighter there, grabbing that center scale and none of the others. Press Q. Now press 3 to preview smooth. And so that's kind of a good example of how to do that. So looking at this, I can see I needed to scale this out to be just generally wider. So, because this thing kind of juts out in its overall scale. And so I'm not going to extrude here. I'm just going to go to vertex and I'm going to select these sections right here. I'm just going to scale them out from the center so that they just match a little bit better. And so that's matching a little closer there. Right, so the geometry that I've made, so I'm back in 1 again, and so this is kind of what it looks like, what I've made so far. Press 3, we'll get a different kind of preview. Using the multi-cut tool again, I'm going to press, make sure that you're in objects mode, and then press the multi-cut tool. There we go. It wasn't working at first, but seems to be going now. So I just added 2 edge loops there so that we're going to have this other kind of bevel coming out here. So exact same thing we've been doing. So face, select the faces here, not over in the orthographic view, not in the perspective view. Gonna extrude, not gonna mess with this, just gonna pull it out by typing it in. And in this case, I'm just gonna scale it in. It is okay to scale it up and down. Actually, never mind, scratch that. I'm not gonna do that. So yeah, scratch what I just said. Do not mess with those controls. So if you wanna scale this in, I recommend extruding it out, and then if you want to scale it vertically after the fact, I would just use the scale tool instead of the extrude scale tool. So that'll kind of pull it in like that. So on this one, it seems to me like that bevel is a little less hard than some of the others. So I think it's kind of okay to have less geometry there. Just gonna add another bevel in here. Just add some of that in. I might do the same here. This bevel, I kind of want it to be gradual, so I'm going to just leave it at the standard settings there. Okay, so this has been a demonstration on how to model the tabletop, and then kind of an antique cylindrical section here. And so keep in mind that this model here, even though it looks like this, this is just a preview of the smooth. And so once you're totally sure that you've nailed it here, and I didn't kind of get down to this bottom section here, and you can see that there's some weird faceting that happens there. So be sure to close off the bottom and the tops, or else you'll get some weird stuff like that. So actually, before I close this out, I just want to make sure that I bevel the bottom as well as the top, even though I was cutting this short. So we just create a bevel. So creating this bevel will get rid of that faceting that we were seeing there. So if we press 3, we got a clean piece of geometry now. And so the reason that that was not a clean piece of geometry before, I'm just going to undo some of this, is basically when it was smoothing, it was, all this geometry was coming to that point right there, right? And so when we press 3, oops, when we press 3, you'll see that all these lines, when it's smoothing, it's kind of creating this pumpkin shape coming into that point. And so the reason why when I bevel it, it doesn't create that is that this plane right here is, along those faces right there, is flat. And so if we bevel it, we'll keep it flat and we'll kind of keep that pumpkin shape from happening here. So be sure when using this technique to kind of close it off on both sides. So edge, double select, we're going to bevel. And so now when I press smooth, it doesn't have that pumpkin shape anymore. So comparing this to the reference image, there's still another kind of section in here that I've yet to get to, but if I were to model those sections, I would do the exact same techniques that I've been doing up here so far. So I've kind of shown all the techniques that we need for this part of the demonstration here. So that's kind of how to start modeling a table. And so we went over kind of how to set up your objects in the attribute editor. We've talked about extruding, so we don't extrude a whole object, we extrude faces and edges. Beveling, if you want to bevel one edge, you can do it in edge mode. And if you want to bevel twice at the same time, select faces, and then it'll bevel on either side of the face. We went over the multi-cut tool, where you can either add in geometry manually, or if you hold down Control, you can create edge loops. And then we talked about pressing 1 is the standard view, and then 3 previews of smooth. And once we're just done with the model and it's ready to kind of print, as you might say, and the modeling toolkit will be in objects mode here. We'll go to the modeling toolkit and then press smooth here, or press smooth up here. And so smooth is the gray box with the orange box coming out of it with the geometry that's doubled, right? Because when you smooth it, you double the geometry and then you kind of average out the edges and the faces here. So I'll press smooth, and there we have it.